It started on a cold, foggy morning just off Route 19, where twisted metal and flashing red-blue lights were the only signs of life on that otherwise silent stretch of road. A mangled SUV lay half-buried in a ditch, steam hissing from the engine, the windshield cracked like a spider web. Emergency crews had already cordoned off the area, their boots crunching on gravel and broken glass. The smell of gasoline hung thick in the air, mixing with the faint scent of burning rubber. The crash itself wasn't particularly strange, at least not at first. It looked like a standard high-speed collision, maybe someone who took the curve too fast in the early morning mist. But what happened next turned that quiet accident scene into the beginning of something none of them could explain. Officer Mark Delaney had seen dozens of crashes in his 10 years with the State Highway Patrol. Most ended the same way, reports filed, cleanup crews called, and families notified. But this one stuck with him. Not because of the vehicle or even the body inside, but because of a man who arrived on foot. An old man, gray-bearded and wrapped in a threadbare coat, emerged from the tree line like he had been watching the crash from the woods. His eyes were sharp, his voice cracked like dry leaves. "You need to get everyone out of here," he told Delaney, pointing a shaky finger at the wreck. "This ground isn't right. It doesn't want you here." Delaney, half amused and half annoyed, dismissed the man as just another local drifter with a flair for the dramatic. He chalked it up to rural superstition, the kind of folklore whispered in small towns where time seemed frozen. The old man didn't fight back, didn't argue. He just stared for a long moment, eyes filled with something eerily calm, then turned and disappeared back into the trees. No ID, no explanation, just a warning no one took seriously. Back at the station, the crash was filed as an unfortunate but ordinary fatality. The driver, 42-year-old Daniel Reeves, had no known enemies, no history of reckless driving, and no sign of foul play. Toxicology came back clean. But something still felt off. Delaney couldn't shake the memory of the old man's words. Not because he believed them, but because of what started happening after. Within days, strange reports began to trickle in. Radios cutting out at the same mile marker. Officers getting nauseous or dizzy near the crash site. One rookie, Officer Jamie Calloway, swore she saw someone standing in the woods just past dusk, tall, motionless, staring. She laughed it off later, blaming low blood sugar and a long shift. But her face told a different story. It wasn't just her. Other members of the unit began experiencing odd moments they couldn't explain. Sudden chills. Dreams that felt too real. A low humming sound at night that no one could trace. Still, the department chalked it all up to stress. Maybe they were working too many shifts. Maybe the crash had left a deeper impact on the team than they realized. But the old man returned one evening. This time, it was Officer Jeff Ramirez who saw him, standing at the exact edge of the woods where the SUV had crashed. The old man didn't speak. He just watched. Ramirez called it in, but by the time backup arrived, the man had vanished again, leaving behind only a small hand-carved wooden talisman on the ground. It was shaped like an eye, and it gave everyone who saw it an uneasy feeling, like it was watching them even after it was locked away in an evidence box. Weeks passed, and the weirdness escalated. Cameras around the station glitched during certain hours. Patrol units reported flickering headlights and dead batteries whenever they passed that particular curve. The area was becoming a ghost zone, technically fine, but somehow wrong. And then, one night, everything changed. The entire unit assigned to the crash site investigation vanished. It started with silence. No check-ins, no radio chatter. 5 officers out on routine patrols simply didn't return. Their last known GPS ping showed them near the crash site. Dispatch tried contacting them for hours. Nothing. When backup arrived the next morning, they found 2 patrol cars, doors open, lights still flashing, engines running. But no sign of the officers. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just radios humming with low static, like they were caught in a loop. The town went quiet after that. People whispered about the curse of the old road. Parents told their kids to stay away from the woods. The police force tightened their protocols, but internally, no one could explain what happened. Some believed the crash had opened something, a tear in the air, a wound in the land. Others said the old man was part of something ancient, something forgotten, a protector trying to warn them from stepping too close. Whatever the case, The story of the missing unit spread fast, drawing attention from state investigators and local journalists, each more baffled than the last. Officer Delaney, haunted by the role he played in ignoring that first warning, took a leave of absence. But he couldn't stay away. The guilt was too loud. He began researching local legends, poring through dusty archives and talking to old-timers in town. What he uncovered sent chills down his spine, stories of disappearances dating back nearly 70 years, all within a 1-mile radius of that curve. Hunters, travelers, even a survey team once vanished without a trace. And always, before each event, someone had tried to warn them. Someone older. Someone who seemed to know what others refused to see. Now, with more eyes on the case and no answers in sight, the question still hangs in the air like fog on that cursed road. What really happened that morning? Why did that crash feel like more than just an accident? And what, if anything, is hiding in those woods, watching, waiting for the next group to step too close? Because something did happen. Something that can't be explained with reports or logic. And whatever it is, it's not finished yet. Delaney hadn't slept properly in weeks. Even when his eyes closed, his mind kept replaying that morning, the old man's face, his warning, the curve in the road, and the silence that followed after the unit went missing. He tried to tell himself it was just coincidence. That people vanish sometimes. That strange things happen and not everything needs an explanation. But deep down, he didn't believe that anymore. He knew something was wrong. And no matter how much he wanted to forget it, he couldn't. Because he'd been there. He was the one who looked that old man in the eyes and chose not to listen. The town of Red Pine had always been quiet. Too quiet, some said. A place where everybody knew everybody, where rumors traveled faster than the mail, and most people minded their business. But the crash had changed something. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath. People were locking their doors earlier. Kids weren't allowed to play near the woods anymore. Even the local diner, usually buzzing with early morning gossip, was quieter. Folks would glance toward the road when they thought no one was looking, like it was some kind of invisible line no one wanted to cross. Delaney started digging into town records. He wasn't a detective, and no one had asked him to investigate anything, but he needed answers. He found a box in the back of the municipal building labeled Historical Incidents, Red Pine Vicinity. Most of it was just old weather reports, forest fire warnings, property disputes, but tucked between the files were a few strange reports. One from 1974 about a missing geologist crew. Another from 1981. 3 teenagers disappeared during a camping trip. In 1992, a bus broke down on Route 19, and 2 passengers were never found. Each file had something in common. The last known location was always near that same mile marker, the same curve, the same dense patch of woods. It wasn't just accidents. It was something else. Something that returned, again and again, quietly, almost patiently. Delaney met with an old park ranger named Walter Hagen, who'd worked those woods for nearly 40 years before retiring. He lived just outside of town, in a small cabin with a hound that barely moved anymore. Hagen was slow to talk at first, but when Delaney mentioned the curve and the old man, the ranger's eyes changed. "I know who you're talking about," he said. "Name's Elias. Don't know if it's his real name, but that's what folks used to call him. He's not just some drifter. He's been around longer than anyone can explain. I saw him when I was a rookie ranger back in '68. Same coat, same eyes. He warned us too. We didn't listen." Delaney leaned in, heart pounding. "And what happened?" Hagen stared into the fireplace. "We lost 2 rangers that night. Went looking for a hunter who never came home. Found his rifle, but not him. Then my partners disappeared. No blood. No sign of a struggle. Just gone. I waited all night with my radio on. No one ever answered. The next morning, Elias was sitting on the tailgate of my truck. Didn't say a word. Just handed me a carved wooden shape, same as you described, and walked away. I never went back there after dark again." Delaney felt the weight of those words settle on him. He wasn't the first to ignore the warning. And clearly, he wasn't the first to suffer the consequences. He returned to the station and tried to convince his superiors to reopen the investigation, not just into the missing officers, but into the whole area. But they weren't interested. Without evidence or explanation, it was all speculation. "You're letting superstition cloud your judgment," they said. "We don't have time for ghost stories." But Delaney knew it wasn't superstition. It was a pattern, a cycle. And it was happening again. The only other person who seemed to believe him was Officer Jamie Calloway. She'd been quiet since the unit disappeared, but one night she knocked on Delaney's door holding a file. Inside were notes she'd been keeping ever since the crash. She hadn't told anyone, didn't want to be labeled unstable, but her pages told a story. Unexplained shadows. Lost time. Her patrol vehicle's dashboard clock skipping ahead minutes at a time without explanation. One night, she wrote, she woke up parked near the crash site with no memory of how she got there. Delaney felt a chill as he read her notes. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that whatever was happening wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional. It was like something was pulling them closer the more they tried to understand it. Like it didn't want to be seen, but it wanted to be felt. They decided to go back. Not in full uniform, not with backup. They knew no one would approve the trip. But they had to see it with their own eyes. They went just after sunset, with flashlights, a map, and Calloway's notes. The curve in the road looked the same, but standing there now, in silence, it felt different. The air was heavier, like something was pressing down on their lungs. The trees were too still, as if holding their breath. They moved carefully into the woods, not far from where the SUV had crashed. The ground was soft, too soft, like it had been disturbed recently. They came across a clearing where the grass didn't grow, where even the insects stayed silent. In the middle of the clearing was a tree, blackened at the base, though there'd been no recent fires. Carved into the trunk was a symbol, an eye, just like the one on the wooden talisman. Beneath it were initials, DR and J.M. Delaney's heart dropped. Daniel Reeves and Jason Mendez. Mendez was one of the missing officers. What was his name doing here? They didn't stay long. The moment their flashlights flickered, they turned back. As they reached the road again, they saw something that stopped them cold. A figure, standing just inside the tree line. Not moving, not speaking, watching. It was Elias. Delaney took a step forward, but Elias raised one hand, slowly, almost like a gesture of warning. And then, just as silently as he had appeared, he turned and vanished into the woods again. Back at Delaney's home, neither of them spoke for a long time. Calloway finally broke the silence. Whatever this is, it's not over. Delaney nodded, eyes fixed on the window, as if expecting to see the woods crawling closer. Because now, it wasn't just about the crash, or the old man, or even the missing officers. It was something older, something buried beneath the soil of red pine for decades, maybe longer. Something that had been waiting, watching, warning, and when no one listened, it simply took. And Delaney was beginning to fear the worst. What if it wasn't done yet? The days that followed were heavy with silence. Even during daylight, Delaney felt like the shadows lingered a little longer than they should. The curve on Route 19 stayed untouched. No one patrolled it now, not officially. It had quietly become a no-go zone. Officers made excuses, rerouted their drives, kept their eyes forward any time they had to pass it. The forest beyond that bend might have looked like any other patch of trees in rural red pine, but to the people who knew, it was different. It was haunted, but not in the way movies make you think. It wasn't about ghosts floating through walls or voices whispering in the dark. It was a presence, patient and watching. And it was still there. Delaney's mind kept circling back to the tree. The eye symbol. The initials. If Mendez had been there, if he'd carved that mark, why hadn't he come back? Was it a message? A warning? Or something else entirely? He thought about all the times he'd dismissed strange stories during his years on the force. Stories from old hunters, hikers, and people just passing through. People talking about lost time, about flickers in the woods, about a feeling they couldn't shake. How many of those stories had come from this same stretch of road? How many had he ignored? Calloway was shaken too. She hadn't been sleeping. Delaney could see it in her face, dark circles under her eyes, the twitch in her jaw when she wasn't speaking. She'd started keeping her curtains closed during the day, her porch light on at night. She told Delaney she'd started hearing a sound again. A low hum, almost like a generator running far away, but steady, and only when she was alone. He hadn't heard it himself. Not yet. But part of him wondered if it was just a matter of time. Meanwhile, Red Pine's mayor was growing frustrated. The missing officers were becoming a public issue now. Families were pushing for answers. News vans had started showing up outside the precinct, and local reporters were hungry for a headline. Most of the department was walking on eggshells. They didn't have a real explanation, and the official story, that the officers may have wandered into unstable terrain and gotten lost, was falling apart fast. There had been no rescue teams, no footprints, no sign of struggle. Nothing. One of the subplots that began to unfold came from someone no one expected, Carly Mendez, Jason's younger sister. She worked as a nurse in a nearby clinic and had always kept her distance from police affairs. But when her brother vanished, she didn't wait around. She started asking questions on her own, reaching out to the last people who'd seen him. She even reached out to Delaney. At first, he didn't want to involve her. But when she showed him her brother's journal, pages of notes that Jason had scribbled in the weeks leading up to the disappearance, he realized she might be closer to the truth than anyone. Jason had been curious too. According to his journal, he'd been tracking strange reports in the area even before the crash. People hearing whispers in the trees. Animals acting strange. A hiker who claimed to see figures in the fog, though none showed up in his photos. Jason had even drawn the same eye symbol Delaney had seen carved into the tree. "The mark keeps showing up," he'd written. "What if it means something? What if it's not just a warning, but a gate?" The word gate stuck with Delaney. It didn't make sense at first, but as he reread the notes, flipping through the pages filled with Jason's sketches, times, and GPS points, something clicked. Jason believed there was a pattern, a cycle that repeated every few decades. He listed years: 1952, 1974, 1992, and each time, people went missing near the woods. Always in small groups, always at night, and always with one or two unexplained sightings beforehand. The deeper Delaney went, the more he realized this wasn't just about one crash or one missing team. It was about something that had been growing in the background, unnoticed. Something ancient. He started referring to it in his notes as the presence. He didn't know what else to call it. It wasn't human, that much he was sure of. But it wasn't quite something from fairy tales either. It was aware. Another subplot took shape when Delaney quietly reached out to Walter Hagen again, the retired ranger. This time, Hagen brought out an old, locked wooden box. Inside were photographs, black and white, faded with age. Most showed forest landscapes, but a few had things in the corners. Blurred figures, shapes that didn't make sense. One photo in particular sent a shiver down Delaney's spine. It was of a fog-covered trail deep in the woods, and in the background was a tall figure, barely visible, but unmistakably watching. Hagen said it had been taken by a fellow ranger back in '74, who'd gone missing a week later. Delaney asked Hagen what he thought the presence really was. Hagen didn't have a clear answer. He only said one thing. Some places aren't meant to be understood. They're not meant to be explained. They're meant to be respected, or feared, but never ignored. Calloway was starting to see things too. Not just shadows or strange dreams, but flashes during daylight. Glimpses of movement in places where no one should be. Once, while driving near the curve, she claimed to see someone standing in the middle of the road, Elias. But when she slammed the brakes, there was no one there. Just tire marks and her own pounding heart. The story kept expanding. Rumors began circulating around Red Pine. Some said the land near the crash site was once a sacred area, long before the town was built. Others claimed a small cult had lived nearby in the 1800s and vanished without a trace. No solid proof ever surfaced, but the stories added to the unease. Delaney even visited the local library's archive, digging through newspaper clippings and property maps. One article from the late 1800s described the area as the hollow that forgets. It mentioned families leaving in the middle of the night, refusing to explain why. Some even left entire homes behind. He started to wonder if the land itself was part of the problem, if something beneath it, or beyond it, was reaching out. The woods had a strange kind of energy, almost like it breathed. There were moments when time seemed to stretch out near that curve, as if minutes took longer. Delaney even tested it once, timing himself during a short walk from one tree to another. His watch and phone didn't match when he came back. But through it all, Elias never returned again. Not in person, just dreams. Both Delaney and Calloway reported the same thing. waking up in the middle of the night after seeing Elias standing at the foot of their bed, staring silently. In each dream, he raised his hand as if to warn them again. But there were no words, just a feeling, heavy, cold, and urgent. And then came the animal disappearances. Dogs, mostly. A few cats. One morning, a farmer from outside Red Pine reported all 5 of his hunting dogs missing. No sign of a break-in, no broken fences. They were just gone. Others began noticing birds had stopped nesting near the crash site. It was like even the animals sensed something unnatural. The tension continued to build. No one had answers. And no one felt safe. Delaney knew they were running out of time. He couldn't explain how, but he felt it. Like the cycle was coming to a head again. Like something had been stirred up by the crash, and now it was watching to see who else would cross the line. And whether they'd ever come back. The atmosphere in Red Pine was heavier than ever, like something was pressing down on the town itself. Clouds seemed to hang low, even on clear days. The wind through the trees by the crash site sounded different now, whispery, almost like voices carried through the leaves. Delaney barely left his house unless it was to meet with Calloway or follow a new lead. Each day brought more signs that something was building. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was anticipation. Whatever was behind the disappearances, behind the presence, wasn't hiding. It was waiting. Calloway started hearing the hum more often. At first it was just at home, but now it followed her to work, into her car, even to the grocery store. She recorded it on her phone, but when she played the recordings back, there was only silence. Then came the dreams, more vivid than ever. Elias would be there, but now he wasn't alone. In the distance, always just out of focus, was another figure. Taller, darker, and still. The kind of stillness that felt unnatural, like the absence of life, not the quiet of it. In every dream, the figure got a little closer. Delaney kept digging into Jason Mendez's journal, hoping he'd missed something. On the very last page, scribbled messily and clearly written in a rush, Jason had written, "There's another side. Not a place, not exactly, but it sees us. The curve isn't just where things happen. It's where they start." That last sentence wouldn't leave Delaney's mind. It wasn't where things happened. It was where they started. He began to suspect that the crash hadn't triggered the events. It had awakened something that had always been there. Something that was now fully awake. The tension in town reached a boiling point when the mayor's own nephew, a delivery driver, failed to return after a late-night drop-off. His last known location? Mile marker 47, right at the infamous curve. That same night, security footage from a nearby gas station showed the headlights of his truck disappearing into the fog and never re-emerging. No screeching tires. No crash. Just gone. The mayor held a closed-door meeting with local officials, and though the press wasn't allowed in, word still got out. Red Pine was officially restricting access to Route 19 between markers 46 and 49. Publicly, it was framed as ongoing road maintenance. Privately, everyone knew the truth. Something was wrong with that stretch of road, and no one was coming back from it. Still, Delaney couldn't let it go. The guilt gnawed at him constantly. He'd been the first to ignore the warning. If he'd taken Elias seriously, maybe the others would still be here. Maybe Mendez wouldn't have gone missing. Maybe Jason's sister Carly wouldn't be waking up to find her brother's boots outside her front door, placed neatly like someone had set them there. The boots were dirty, but dry. No footprints. No tracks leading up to them. Just the boots and a small twig, broken into the shape of that same I symbol, laid across the toes. Carly was terrified but determined. She started getting involved more directly, meeting with Calloway and Delaney every evening to compare notes. She brought them a USB drive. Jason had backed up some audio logs. Most were field reports or private voice memos, but one stood out. It was just 6 seconds long, recorded during one of his solo patrols near the curve. It was a whisper, not a voice, not really, but a layered sound, like multiple people breathing out words at the same time. None of them could make sense of it until Carly played it backward. That's when they heard it clearly. Do not follow the silence. Delaney's blood ran cold. That same silence had become a marker. It was always the first thing they noticed before someone went missing. No wind. No birds. No radio static. Just the kind of silence that swallowed everything. That recording proved what they feared. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. A warning from the other side, or perhaps a trap. As tension built, more strange things began to happen. One evening, Calloway found her patrol car parked outside her house, with no memory of driving it there. She had walked home from the station. Inside the vehicle was a pine cone placed on the passenger seat. Small, harmless looking. But when she picked it up, it crumbled in her hand, leaving behind something strange, a tiny folded piece of paper with a single word written in red ink. Soon. Meanwhile, Elias hadn't appeared in person again, but sightings of him started coming in from others. A young couple who got lost hiking claimed an old man had led them out of the woods without speaking, just pointing silently. A jogger said he saw someone matching Elias's description sitting on the mile marker sign, staring straight ahead. By the time he circled back, the man was gone. No footprints. No trace. Delaney began to believe Elias wasn't just a man anymore, if he ever was. Maybe he was a messenger or a guardian. Or maybe he had once been like them, pulled in by curiosity, and now was trapped in a cycle of trying to warn others before it was too late. They decided it was time to go deeper. Not just walk the edge of the woods or the curve, but into the thickest part of it, the part no one had entered since the night the unit disappeared. They needed to find the origin point. The tree with the eye symbol was only the beginning. Carly, despite Delaney's protests, insisted on coming. "If Jason's still out there," she said, "I'm not staying behind." They prepared as best they could: GPS trackers, radios, flashlights, survival gear. But everyone knew in their gut that technology wouldn't help them. This wasn't just terrain they were crossing. It was a threshold. As they reached the clearing, everything was still. Not just quiet, still. The same feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. Calloway whispered, "We shouldn't be here." But they kept moving, hearts pounding. Then, a sound, soft and low. The hum. But now it had changed. It had rhythm, like breathing. They turned to see movement through the trees. Figures, barely visible. Watching from the edge. Not moving. Not blinking. Just there. The presence had revealed itself, but only in pieces, like it was teasing them. Then came the shift. Delaney's flashlight flickered and died. The GPS blinked, then went dark. The hum grew louder. Trees seemed to bend slightly inward, not by wind, but like they were being pulled. And in the center of the clearing, something had changed. The tree was different now, no longer burnt at the base. It was alive, glowing faintly, and at its root, new carvings. Initials, not just DR and JM anymore. There were more now, 5 of them, and one was MC, Marcus Caldwell, one of the officers who had gone missing. Another was JC, Jamie Calloway. She froze when she saw it. "What is this?" she whispered. "Why is my name here?" No one answered. Carly took a step closer to the tree, then stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. On the far side of the clearing was a figure standing perfectly still. Not Elias. Someone else. Something else. It was tall, its outline faint like smoke. And when Delaney blinked, it was closer. Just a few feet from the tree. He reached for his radio. Static. Nothing else. Calloway turned to run, but something stopped her. Not physically. Just a pressure. Like the air around her had thickened. Carly grabbed Delaney's arm, eyes wide with terror. "We're not supposed to be here. This is where it begins." The hum reached its peak. The ground trembled, not like an earthquake, but like something underneath was stirring. The light from the tree pulsed. Once. Twice. And then everything went silent. Delaney looked around. Calloway was gone. So was Carly. And for the first time, Delaney felt what the others had felt before they vanished. He was completely alone. Delaney's breath hitched in his throat. 1 second, Carly and Calloway were beside him, and the next, they were simply gone. The clearing was still there, the tree still pulsing faintly, but the air had shifted. It wasn't just silence now, it was emptiness. The kind that presses against your ears and makes your own heartbeat feel too loud. He spun around in a slow circle, calling their names over and over. No answer. No footprints. No signs of a struggle. Just that same humming sound, quieter now, fading like it had gotten what it came for. He wanted to believe this was some elaborate trick of the woods, that they had somehow wandered just out of view. But he knew better. He'd seen the tree. The initials. Callaways were there before she disappeared, as if the forest had already decided what was going to happen, long before they ever stepped inside. He dropped to one knee, staring at the ground where Carly had stood. The soil was untouched, smooth, undisturbed, like she'd been erased. Then he heard it. A whisper, soft but urgent, like it was coming from inside his own head. Go back. It wasn't Elias. It didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a command. A line being drawn. Delaney rose slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing moved, not even the leaves. But he felt it. The same presence from before, closer now, as if circling just beyond what his eyes could see. He stumbled back toward the road, one cautious step at a time. It was darker than it should have been. His flashlight, though new, flickered again. By the time he broke the tree line, the road was empty, and the hum had vanished completely. The world outside the woods felt too normal, almost staged. His truck was right where he left it, engine cold, untouched. But everything else had changed. At the station, no one believed him. The official story was that Calloway and Carly never entered the woods with him. One deputy claimed to have seen Calloway heading toward the diner that night, and Carly's car was found parked outside her house the next morning. But Delaney knew what he saw. He remembered the feel of Carly's hand gripping his arm. He remembered the expression on Calloway's face when she saw her initials carved into the tree. He remembered how everything disappeared when the hum peaked. It didn't make sense. None of it. And yet, when he went to Carly's house, everything was normal. Her shoes by the door. Her phone charging on the nightstand. Her cat asleep on the couch. It was like she'd never left. But when he checked her call history, her last outgoing call was to him, time-stamped exactly 15 minutes after she'd already vanished. He played the voicemail. It was only static. The second twist started unfolding that night. Delaney was reviewing Jason Mendez's journal again, flipping back and forth between the pages, looking for anything he'd missed. That's when he noticed something strange. Hidden in the margins of the last few pages, faint, nearly invisible unless held under the right light, were coordinates. For sets, spread out across Red Pine. He double-checked them, plugged them into a map, and realized they formed a pattern, a diamond, surrounding the crash site. The curve was dead center. He didn't sleep. At sunrise, he visited the first coordinate, near an old, collapsed barn on the outskirts of town. There, hidden beneath a pile of rotting wood, he found a rusted tin box. Inside was another wooden carving, an eye, again, but this one had a small crack down the middle. A split. And carved beneath it was a phrase, "The gate is weakening." The second location was even more unsettling. It led into an abandoned churchyard, overgrown with weeds and long forgotten. Buried beneath one of the old graves, wrapped in a torn piece of canvas, was a journal, this one much older than Jason's. The cover was dated 1931. Inside were pages filled with strange accounts, flickering lights, voices in the trees, people walking into the forest and never returning. One passage stopped Delaney cold. It read, "We build over it. We thought it would sleep, but we never buried it deep enough." He sat there on the edge of the cracked gravestone, trying to piece it all together. If these coordinates were connected, if people had known for generations that something was beneath the land, why had no one done anything? Or had they tried and failed? Back at the station, he laid out maps, notes, the journals. He drew connections, traced timelines. Every 20 years, give or take, the pattern repeated. Always a triggering event. Always a group gone missing. And always someone left behind to warn the next cycle. The realization hit him hard. Elias was the last one left behind. The one who saw too much and tried to stop it. The one no one listened to. Just like Delaney. And now, the cycle had come again. He tried tracking down Elias. He asked around town, checked hospitals, retirement homes, even police records. But there was no trace of him. No last name. No home address. No paper trail. It was like he only existed inside the forest, and perhaps he always had. Then came the biggest escalation yet. A wildfire broke out near the western edge of the woods. No lightning. No human activity. It just started, rapidly and without warning. Delaney drove out with local responders, but when they reached the flames, it didn't behave like a normal fire. It moved slow, too slow, burning in patterns, as if carving a shape into the land. And when it finally died down, it left behind a circle of scorched earth, with another tree standing untouched in the middle. And on that tree, the same I symbol. Only this time, there were dozens of initials. Delaney's breath caught when he saw his own. Something had changed. The presence was no longer just watching. It was marking, choosing, preparing. The fire hadn't been a threat. It was a signal. A message burned into the earth. He returned home that night with his heart racing and his thoughts scattered. The hum was back, louder than ever. He paced the floor, lights on in every room, staring out the windows for signs of movement. At exactly 3:12 a.m., his phone buzzed. One new voicemail. The call came from Calloway's number. He played it with shaking hands. At first, static, then breathing, slow, uneven, and then a voice, unmistakably hers, whispering one sentence before the line went dead. "We're still here, Mark, but we're not alone." Delaney sat down hard, the phone still in his hand, the hum rising again all around him, this time not from the forest, but from inside his own walls. And for the first time, he realized the presence had never been contained to the woods. It was already inside. Delaney didn't move for a long time. He sat on the edge of his couch, phone still in his hand, the voicemail playing on repeat, Calloway's whisper echoing in the room. "We're still here, Mark, but we're not alone." He had no idea what that meant. Was it a warning? A plea for help? Or something else entirely? He looked around his living room. Every shadow seemed darker now. Every creak in the floor, every hum in the walls, it all felt alive, like the presence had followed him home. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. For 2 days, he stayed holed up in his house, poring over the journals, the recordings, the maps. He knew the pieces were all there, but something was missing. Then, sometime past midnight, he remembered the fourth coordinate, the last one from Jason Mendez's journal. It was the only location he hadn't checked. Tucked far into the forest, past a stretch of land no one ventured into anymore. Locals called it Hollow Mile, a nickname passed down for generations. The spot had always been avoided, even before the disappearances. Something about it made people uneasy. Delaney packed light, just a flashlight, a radio, and a small compass. He left a note at the station, just in case he didn't return. The last line read, "If I disappear, don't cover it up. Tell the truth." As he made his way through the dense trees, the humming started again. This time, he didn't turn back. He followed it. The deeper he went, the more the air changed. It was colder, damp, like walking through the edge of a storm. His radio gave a soft click, then went dead. Even the compass began to spin. Still, he pressed on. When he finally reached the coordinates, the trees opened into a hollowed clearing, just like the others, but this one was different. In the center stood not one, but 4 trees, twisted together at the base like roots had grown into each other. They formed an archway, dark and hollow inside. It looked like a door. The bark was covered in the ice symbol, carved hundreds of times, overlapping. And at the foot of the arch was something that stopped Delaney cold. Carly. She was lying there, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Beside her, Calloway knelt, wide-eyed and shaking, her face pale. She looked up at Delaney, and for a moment, it felt like everything stilled. "You found us," she whispered. Delaney rushed forward, helping Carly sit up. She was weak but alive. "What happened?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Where did you go?" Calloway pointed toward the arch. "We didn't go anywhere," she said. "It took us. But not like you'd think. It didn't move us through space. It moved us through memory, through something older than time. We were inside it. It showed us things." "What things?" Delaney asked. Calloway's eyes were full of fear. "The others. The missing ones. They're still here. Trapped. But not dead. Not exactly. It keeps them. It feeds on something inside them. Fear, regret. I don't know. But it doesn't kill. It collects." Delaney looked at the arch again. The trees were whispering, moving slightly though there was no wind. "What is it?" he asked. "I think it's a gate," Calloway said quietly. "A living one. Something ancient. And I think someone opened it long ago and never closed it." Suddenly, the humming surged. The arch began to glow faintly, pulsing with light from deep within. Carly stirred, her eyes flicking open. "It's waking up," she muttered. "It knows you're here." Delaney turned to Calloway. "We need to shut it. Somehow." "I don't think we can," she said. not without giving it something in return. A deep vibration rolled through the ground. The humming turned into a low moan, like hundreds of voices layered together. Then, from within the arch, they saw shapes. Shadows moving just beyond the threshold. One stepped forward. It was Jason Mendez. Delaney froze. Jason's face was unchanged, but his eyes were distant, empty, like he was half there, half somewhere else. He stepped out of the arch slowly, looking at Delaney. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice hollow. "It remembers everyone who passes through. It never forgets." "Jason, we're getting you out," Delaney said firmly. Jason shook his head. "You can't take us back. We're part of it now. But maybe you can stop it from growing." Delaney didn't know what that meant. But Jason stepped aside, revealing others behind him, figures, blurry and ghost-like. Ramirez, Caldwell, even the driver from the original crash, all with the same hollow eyes. Trapped, Carly tried to stand, but stumbled. "We can't leave them," she said. "No," Jason said softly. "But you can keep it from taking more." Delaney looked down. Beneath the arch was a stone slab, like a seal. Cracks were forming through it, glowing with faint red light. Jason pointed. "It's opening again. The cycle is ending. Or starting. Depends on what you do next." Delaney had no answers. No plan. Just instinct. He stepped forward, pulled the carving from his pocket, the one with the cracked eye, and held it over the glowing crack. The humming turned into a scream, sharp and electric. The arch twisted violently. The trees bent inward. Jason shouted, "Now! Break it!" Delaney snapped the carving in half and slammed it down onto the stone. A burst of light exploded from the arch, knocking them all back. The voices shrieked, and the light turned to smoke, swirling and folding into itself. The ground shook violently. And then, silence. When the light faded, the arch was gone. No trees, no carvings. Just grass and dirt. Calloway helped Carly to her feet, both of them staring in disbelief. "Is it over?" she asked. Delaney looked around, breathing hard. "I think. We closed it." But as they turned to leave, Carly tugged at Delaney's arm. "Where's Jason?" He looked back. The clearing was empty. All of them, the shadows, the trapped, were gone. Delaney stood there, heart aching. They hadn't saved them. They'd only sealed them in again. Back in Red Pine, things slowly returned to normal. The hum disappeared. The road reopened. The trees looked like trees again. But something had shifted. Delaney filed no report. There was nothing to file. The official story said Carly had been found near the river, that Calloway had suffered a breakdown and recovered after a few weeks of rest, that the missing officers were still under investigation. But Delaney knew better. He returned to the site weeks later. Nothing remained. No sign of the arch. No carvings. But as he walked the perimeter, he noticed something buried in the soil. He dug it out, a small stone with the eye symbol etched into it, freshly carved. He turned it over. On the back, one word was written. Soon. He looked up, heart sinking. Because maybe the gate hadn't been closed. Maybe it had just moved. Delaney didn't tell anyone about the stone. He kept it in a small box on his nightstand, locked away like a secret he wasn't ready to face. Some days, he convinced himself it meant nothing. Just a piece of the past, a strange coincidence, a symbol with no more power left in it. But there were nights when he'd wake suddenly, drenched in sweat, heart racing, the hum echoing faintly in his ears again. And in those moments, he knew. The gate hadn't disappeared. It had simply moved. Waiting. Watching. Choosing its moment. Back in Red Pine, life gradually returned to normal, at least on the surface. The road near the curve was repaved, new signs were posted, and the town issued a quiet statement that the area was safe again. People started driving that route once more, though they rarely lingered. The locals still avoided it at night. Some habits never die, especially when they're born from fear. Calloway eventually resigned from the force. She moved to a quieter part of the state, somewhere without woods or old stories. Before she left, she and Delaney had one last conversation. She didn't say much, just that she didn't dream anymore, not since the arch vanished. "It's like it took the part of me that could still imagine things," she said with a tired smile. And maybe that's a good thing. Carly returned to work at the clinic. She threw herself into helping people, trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy. But Delaney knew she hadn't let it go. Every now and then, he'd find her parked near the curve, sitting silently in her car, just staring at the woods. Once, he asked her why she kept coming back. She replied, "If Jason's in there somewhere, I want him to know he's not forgotten." Delaney stayed with the department, though something in him had changed permanently. He took fewer night shifts, spent more time reading, and stopped brushing off the strange calls from the outskirts of town. When a hiker claimed to see a figure in the trees, he didn't laugh. When a farmer said he heard whispers coming from the edge of his property, Delaney took notes. He didn't assume anything anymore. He listened, because sometimes the smallest details were the ones that mattered most. He went back through every old file, every report, every strange call that had ever come through the station over the years. Patterns began to emerge, cycles not just in Red Pine, but in surrounding towns too. Different names, different locations, but always the same themes: silence, symbols, disappearances, and a hum that seemed to come from nowhere. It was all connected. The gate wasn't a one-time event. It was a thread that wove through time, across generations, waiting for someone to pull it open again. In his own quiet way, Delaney became the next guardian, like Elias had been. Watching, waiting, making sure no one wandered too close. Sometimes he thought about the old man and wondered where he had gone after the gate closed. If he had finally been freed, or if he was still out there somewhere, waiting for someone else to carry the weight. He'd never know for sure. But Delaney felt his presence in small ways, like the wind suddenly shifting when he passed a tree with no wind, or a whisper that didn't belong to any living voice. One spring morning, nearly a year after the gate vanished, a young boy showed up at the station. He couldn't have been more than 12. Said he was exploring the woods behind his grandparents' house when he found something strange buried near an old tree. Delaney tensed as the boy unwrapped the object, a smooth stone, marked with an eye. No writing on the back, just the symbol. The boy asked, "Is it worth anything?" Delaney smiled softly, gently took the stone from his hands, and said, "Only if you forget where you found it." The boy nodded, confused, and left. Delaney locked the stone away beside the first one. Two now, one with a message, one without. He wondered how many more would appear over the years. He never tried to explain it all to outsiders. It was too much, too strange, and too unbelievable. But he did keep Jason Mendez's journal safe, stored in a locked cabinet in the station's archive with the label "Field Notes Confidential," just in case someone else came looking for answers one day. As for the rest of the missing Reeves, Caldwell, Ramirez, their families never got closure. No bodies were ever found, no explanations ever given. But those who had seen what Delaney had seen understood. They were still part of something larger, something unseen. Not lost, but not returned either. Trapped in a place that didn't operate by human rules. A place that fed on silence, regret, and memory. In time, Red Pine's story became another local legend, the kind people whispered about over coffee or warned their kids about when they played too close to the woods. The phrase, "Don't follow the silence," was spray-painted once under a bridge near Route 19. The town removed it, but someone always painted it back, as if the forest itself wanted the message to stay alive. Delaney often walked the old roads alone, sometimes just to listen. Not for the hum, not for the presence, but for the quiet. He'd learned that silence itself wasn't always a threat. Sometimes it was a boundary, a reminder, a choice. And if you listened carefully, it could even bring peace. But he also knew that silence had a twin, the kind that waited. And eventually, someone would forget the warnings. Someone would hear the hum and follow it. And the gate would open again. For now, though, the woods were still. And Delaney, older, quieter, and wiser, watched over them. Because every story needs a witness. And every mystery begins with someone who ignored the first warning. The kind whispered by an old man at the edge of a crash site, years ago. The kind that no one ever wants to believe. Until it's far too late.